It's Wednesday night. Time to go live with the Panther-Lair Show here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Back at the end of the off week. Time to jump into the second half of the season, and certainly a lot of things to talk about on that front. And we got a whole hour to break it all down, and I think we're definitely going to do it. Listen, while you're here, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can like this video. That would be very much appreciated as well. And like and subscribe. Those are the things that YouTube people are always asking, their viewers to do. And so I'm gonna take this opportunity to do that, to make that request as well. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the YouTube address, and then like this video, subscribe. Because, we do a lot of things on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have the daily morning Pitt video. Monday through Friday, we release a new video. We had a new one come out this morning. We have a new one come out tomorrow morning. And like I say, every day of the week. And then, of course, we have our live show here on Wednesday nights. We have a live post-game show after the games. That'll be an interesting one on Saturday night. Pitt's at Louisville for an 8 o'clock kickoff. Love these primetime games. Going to do it again the following week. When Pitt plays at North Carolina for another 8 o'clock game. So we'll have some late post-game shows. We're going to do it nonetheless. I mean, even if it's late at night, we're still going to have our post-game shows probably, hopefully, start at midnight. Hopefully the game doesn't go so late that we don't start until 12:30 or something. I'd like to be started by midnight. No promises, but hopefully that's what happens. If you're worried that you're going to miss the live show, the live post-game show, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications and get the alert sent to your phone, and then you'll know exactly when we go live. So click that subscribe button, click that like button. We appreciate that very much. Like I say, we're coming up here at the start of the second half of the season. I want to find it here because I took a poll on Twitter earlier today. When did I run this? About 4.5 hours ago. And it's gotten more than 900 votes. And it's about Pitt's final record. Basically, I mean, it's ultimately about their final regular season record, but it's about what they do in the final 6 games. And Pitt, of course, facing the second half of the season, sitting at 4-2 overall, 1-1 in the ACC. And they've got 6 conference games remaining. And so I asked the poll question on Twitter, in the final 6 games, Pitt will go, and you get 4 options. You can put 4 options in a poll question on Twitter. And so I picked the 4 potential records. I mean, hopefully there are no other possible records outside of these 4. I don't really want to envision that scenario, but 6-0, 5-1, 4-2, 3-3. What record do you see for Pitt in the final 6 games? And like I say, I'll click refresh here just to see where we're at. 942 votes. And not the majority, but the plurality say 4-2. 35% say 4-2. About 29% say 5-1. 25% say 6-0. And then 10% say 3-3. So there's at least, as it relates to a 6-game sample size, there's optimism that they'll go at least 4-2, if not win 5 or 6 games overall. Very small percentage are expecting 3-3, and I didn't really get any responses to saying 2-4 or anything like that. That would be pretty unpleasant. But we'll start that as a conversation topic right here. You guys can in the chat screen there during the live show, you can put your prediction for the final 6 games. What record do you think Pitt will have? 6-0, 5-1, 4-2, 3-3. And I'll say, as someone who sort of notoriously has hot takes and firm takes and really, comes in with a strong opinion, I'll tell you that I don't have one clue about what this final record's going to be. I could see 4-2. I could see 5-1. It's for me, it's probably between those two. The reality is, if they solve certain problems that don't necessarily seem unsolvable, but still have not been solved to this point with any kind of consistency. But if they solve certain problems, 6-0 is a possibility. 5-1 is probably the most likely optimistic scenario. 4-2 might be the most likely scenario overall, because that sort of assumes that they maybe fix a few problems but not all of the problems, or they fix some of the problems some of the time, but they don't fix them consistently enough to win consistently over the final 6 games. Because I just don't know what this offense... I was going to say I don't know what this offense is going to be or what this offense is going to look like in the final 6 games, but I'm afraid that's actually not true. I'm afraid that I do know what this offense is going to be and what it's going to look like in the final 6 games. And when it's going well and they're doing what they want to do, it's going to look like it has in the first 6 games, which is to say it's going to be built on the run. Now, if you've watched the Morning Pitt videos this week and even late last week, I think you know where I stand with this offense. I think you know what I think this offense should do. I think you know what I think this offense should be built on and what it should be built around and what ultimately could lead to the most successful, productive, effective, and consistent offense. You know, it still can be based off the running game. It still can be built on running the ball. I'm okay with that because you've got one really good running back, maybe great running back, and you've got another one who's coming back who's another really good running back, potentially great running back. And there's a little bit of momentum and a little bit of, positive motion forward for this running game. And so I understand building the offense off of that. I understand if they want to rely on that as they go into these final 6 games. And I expect them to try to rely on that in the final 6 games. But you know, and I know, and Frank Signetti knows, and Keaton Slovis knows, and Pat Narduzzi knows, and everybody knows they're going to have to find some solutions in the passing game at some point. Now, on one of the morning Pitts, I think earlier this week, I talked about Pitt's 5-game winning streak in the ACC back in 2018, where they beat Syracuse, then they lost to Notre Dame in a non-conference game, and then they beat Duke, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest in succession to clinch the ACC championship. And while Kenny Pickett, as a first-year full-time starter that year, made some big throws in those 5 games, it was ultimately the running game. You know, Darren Hall and Quadri Olison alone, not to mention anybody else on the team, but just those 2 guys were averaging like 200 yards per game on the ground in those 5 ACC wins that ultimately clinched the Coastal Division. And so it can be done. Kenny Pickett, I think, in that 5-game stretch averaged about 160 yards, passing yards per game. So it can be done. But you're going to give yourself a better chance to win if you genuinely have a balanced offense. And it's funny to be at this point and be talking about, for all the talk through the offseason of balanced offense, for all the talk through the offseason of how they were going to return balance to the offense, of how this offense was going to be more balanced than the last 3 years or even the last 4 years if you throw in 2018. You know, here we find ourselves at the midpoint of the season, 6 games down, 6 games to go, coming out of the off week, talking about how they need more balance. They've shifted it in the opposite direction, where they're particularly run heavy now. And it's not just in the plays that they call. I mean, I think certainly they've called more runs than passes. I mean, I can break down the numbers on that. I don't think it's not like 70-30 type of split. I doubt it's even 60-40 type of split. It's probably somewhere 55-45, somewhere around there. I'll figure out the numbers later. That's sort of inconsequential. It's not as much about what plays they're calling as it is about what plays are working. And right now, what's working are the running plays, and that's great. Yeah. You run the ball, that's tremendous. I as I've talked with people about that North Carolina game this week, I've sort of joked that Pitt's best chance against North Carolina, with the way their offense is rolling, with the way Drake May is playing right now, Pitt's best chance against North Carolina is to like run the ball so well that they have possession for like 42 minutes and just hope they can get one drive where North Carolina doesn't score a touchdown and they end up winning 28-21, 28-24 or something like that. If you have an effective running game, you might not be able to hold the ball for 42 minutes, but you can win a time of possession game and maybe sort of suffocate a high-powered offense just by keeping them on the sidelines and you know, limiting possessions and making each of their possessions more sort of precious or more sort of valuable, that if they fail to score on one of them, that could ultimately be the difference. In North Carolina, with the way they're giving up rushing yards, Duke ran for 297 on them last week. Their defense has been better in conference games than it was in the non-conference, but they're still struggling. Pitt should be able to run the ball on that team, and if they do, maybe that could be a game plan that could win or maybe give them a chance. But ultimately, you're going to need some effectiveness out of the passing game as well. And so we've talked a lot this week about what it's going to take to get the passing game going. And like I said, if you've watched the Morning Pit this week or late last week, you know what I think. You know where I stand on what I want to see out of this passing game, on how I think this passing game could excel, how I think they could sort of start building something positive in this second half of the season. You've heard me talk a lot about Gavin Bartholomew. I think he is a crucial part of this offense. I think he's criminally underused or criminally underutilized. With only 17 targets through 6 games. Part of it is he's been hurt. I think he's been dealing with different injuries that have limited him in practice. Hopefully he's gotten back or at least closer to full health or 100% healthy status after this off week, after some real rest time. But you're going to have to get to the ball to him. You're going to have to throw the ball to Gavin Bartholomew simply, for the very simple fact that good things happen when you do. He has 14 catches. 8 of them have either gained a first down or a touchdown. I'll take that. His reception rate, 14 catches on 17 targets, is like top 5 in the country among Power 5 tight ends who've seen at least 15 targets this season. His passer rating, the quarterback passer rating when throwing to Gavin Bartholomew, 14 of 17 for 229 and 2 touchdowns. That's an NFL passer rating of 158.0. A perfect NFL passer rating is 158.3. That's where Gavin Bartholomew is right now. I mean, good things happen when you throw him the ball. He gets a lot of yards after the catch. He's one of the tops in the nation, actually, among Power 5 tight ends with at least 15 targets. He averages the second most yards after catch per reception in the country. So we're not just talking about a guy who can block. We're not just talking about a big lumbering tight end who catches a pass and falls down. He makes plays with the ball in his hands. I see no good reason not to pepper him with 5, 6, 7 targets a game. Maybe 7's a lot, but 5 or 6? I don't know. I don't know what you lose in doing that. It seems to me like, of the variety of outcomes, teaching I shouldn't say teaching. We went over this a year or two ago, but I'm reteaching my kids how to play blackjack, and I'm talking about outcomes. Like, you're not going to get the best outcome every time, but you want to look for the highest probability outcome. What's most likely to happen here? You always expect a 10 because you've got this, percentage chance of getting a 10 is a greater percentage of anything else. With Gavin Bartholomew, your highest probability outcomes are good. They're good. Get him the ball. Throw it to El Barto. I don't know what you don't stand to lose anything. And I think, and like I say, I've talked about this a lot. I've talked about throwing to Gavin Bartholomew a lot. I've talked about sort of getting into sort of a rhythm with the passing game. Shorter passes, 7-8 yard gains. 7 and 8 yard gains are great for this offense. 7 and 8 yard gains through the air are fantastic, particularly as they get started in this second half of the season. Because if you can come out and throw for 7 or 8 yards on first down, man, the world is your oyster. It honestly is. And this is one of my issues has been a lot of people have complained about throwing or running too much on first down. And I get that. I think you do need to mix up your first down play calling. I think throwing on first down can give you an opportunity because they're going to be ready for you to run on first down. But a bigger issue I've had is when they get into second and short, when they get into 2nd and 2 or 2nd and 3 or 2nd and 1. And they still hand it off. Now, with the running game going the way it is, when you have Abanikanda and Hammond, you're going to get a lot of first downs running it on 2nd and 2. But that's also, as former Pitt offensive lineman Mike McGlynn said on Twitter, I think during the Virginia Tech game, 2nd and 2 is like a free down. I like my chances of converting a 2 yard to go down and distance situation with Abanikanda or Hammond. So on 2nd and 2, I kind of want to throw the ball. I kind of want to try and see if I can get a big chunk because they're going to be loading up to try and stop Abanikanda and Hammond. Pat Narduzzi talked on Monday about tendencies. I bet when other teams look at Pitt's tendencies, 2nd and short, the tendency is to hand it off. So you might as well throw it. Narduzzi said, maybe we need to break some tendencies. That will be a good one to break. 2nd and short, throw it. Take a shot. But you can put yourself in those second and short situations with a 7 or 8 yard pickup on first down. And I think you can scheme easy 7 or 8 yard pickups, particularly early in the game. When you look at your opening drive that you script out, I think you can scheme in some easy, quick 7, 8 yard pickups. Take the snap, 1, 2, balls out. And it's getting 7 yards here or 8 yards there, or it's going to the check down. And I talked about this all week because I think this is the key for this offense. You build it off the run. You involve Alberto at tight end, whether it's in the flat or on wheel routes, those kinds of things he was doing so well last year, and he's done well this year when he's had the opportunity. And then you work sort of quick passes for medium distance gains. Even like to the, or even short distance gains, 4 to 7 yards or 8 yards. And I think Konate Mumfield can run those routes well. I think he's a very good route runner. I think he's really sharp. I think he is reliable. I think Jared Wayne is reliable. And you're down on wide receivers now. We'll talk about Jaden Bradley and his decision to leave the team, or his entering the transfer portal. But you can, I think Mumfield and Wayne can get those passes. We're all clamoring for the downfield passing game, and I understand that, and it's got to be part of the offense eventually. But I think this offense can build up a whole lot through the running game, through the tight end, and through the quick, short, dink and dunk passing game, just to get into a rhythm. There's no rhythm in this offense. There's no rhythm in this passing game. It's disjointed, it's out of sync, and it's been that way for the better part of 6 games. Get into a rhythm. Get Keaton Slovis comfortable. Get Mumfield and Wayne and Bub Means comfortable catching the ball. And as you do that, and as you show that you can run and you can hit these quick passes, opportunities are going to present themselves downfield. If you come out on the first series on Saturday night, and first down is a 6-yard pass to Jared Wayne, second down is a handoff to Abanikanda that gets 3 yards. And 3rd and 1, you hand it off again to Abanikanda and you get a first down. And you get back up to the line of scrimmage and you get going and you throw to Gavin Bartholomew on the next first down and you get 7 or 8 yards. And you throw to Mumfield for about 14 yards on 2nd and 2. And then you hand it off on the next first down. And now you're going to get 5 or 6 yards because you're doing a bunch of different things that has the defense kind of bouncing around. And then you're on another first down, or you're in a 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 6 and you get Bartholomew again for 6 yards. I'm not nothing I just said requires a whole hell of a lot of offensive acumen or crazy playmaking or wild creative plays. It's basic, simple stuff that I think the players are here who can accomplish it. And I think the way defenses have played Pitt, those opportunities should be there. And if you can do that, if you can hit it, just chunk, little stuff, dink and dunk and handoff and dink and dunk and handoff. And you can do that stuff, and you still got a great running back. He's on the screen right there. He's going to make some plays for you. You're going to get inside the 35. You're going to get inside the 30. And guess what? You might have Bub Means on a post now, because they're trying to cover all this different stuff you're doing in the flats and up close and with the handoffs and Jared Wayne for 6 yards and Alberto in the flat or on a wheel route. They're going to be trying to cover all these things. Well, guess who can get single coverage on a post at that point? You might have a chance there. You run play action, you hit the post, and guess what? You just put together a first drive, an offensive drive with momentum and rhythm and consistency. And Keaton Slovis feels good because he completed 6 out of 7 on the drive. Your receivers are all getting involved. Like you have Mumfield, you have Wayne, you have Alberto, and you have Means all catching a pass on that drive. You got Abanikanda taking a couple of handoffs, and he's got 15, 20 yards. It doesn't seem that complicated. It doesn't seem that difficult if you have the players that Pitt has. And this is the thing: I still think they have good players on offense. Maybe we overestimated what some of these guys were capable of, but after 6 games, I think we have an idea of what they can do and how to use them. And Frank Signetti should see that as well. It's just a matter of what they come out and try to do. Because I think you need rhythm in this offense. Now, if they can get some rhythm in the offense, if they can start spreading the ball around a little bit more, taking that sort of dink and dunk, almost West Coast approach, I think the offense can be pretty effective. And once you hit one or two of those, the post above means or something like that, now the defense just doesn't even know what poison they're going to pick, and you're going to have more opportunities for the run game, which is ultimately what you want to do, because you want to eat up time of possession, you want to march the ball down the field, and you want to get a bunch of yards for Abanikanda and Hammond. And I think there are wrinkles you can throw in there too. I think you can put both guys in the backfield at the same time. I think you can do different stuff. The defense won't know where the ball is going. Is it going to 2? Is it going to 6? Is it a fake to 2 and it's going to 6? Is it a fake to 6 and it's going to 2? Is it fake to one of them and it's going downfield? You don't have the greatest collection of weapons in the ACC, but you've got good enough weapons that you can make these plays. And if you can do that, if you can make these plays, if you can get an effective offense going on the field, you can win a bunch of these games. Because these 6, I mean, we've talked about it a million times. These 6 teams, Louisville and Carolina, Virginia and Duke and Syracuse and Miami, they're not pushovers. I mean, I'm not gonna claim that they're pushovers, but who scares you? Like legitimately scares you, says that's a game. I just don't think, like, if Clemson was coming up in 2 weeks, you would say I don't think they could beat Clemson. It's just say. But like, Louisville is going to present challenges for sure. Carolina is going to be a really tough game. Syracuse, we'll keep waiting and seeing on Syracuse until Syracuse comes to Heinz Field. Miami's Miami. Pitt hasn't won down there since 2014. The last time before that was 1963. There are challenges, but nobody's unbeatable. The defense, I think, will keep rounding into form. The running game is what it is. Get something out of the passing game, and this team can flirt with 5-1 or 6-0 down the stretch, and still be in the competition for the Coastal title. I mean, I think that's realistic. But they have to solve some of those problems. They have to figure out some of those issues. See what they do. We'll see what they do. All right, let's jump into the chat screen, because we always like to have these chats. Of course, before we start on the chat, we want to tell you about our friend Chris Gates. You guys know Chris by now. ChrisGatesFitness.com. Chris_Gates on Twitter. Oh man, I should have looked that up. Why, Chris? Why didn't I look up your Yeah, Chris_Gates. I got that right. Chris, if you don't know Chris, I mean, first thing you need to know, he's got a great first name. Second thing you need to know, he's a big-time Pitt fan, one of the biggest Pitt fans I know. And the third, and maybe most important thing you need to know, is Chris is an online fitness coach. He's from Pittsburgh. He's a huge Pitt fan, and he works with people all over the world to build muscle, burn fat, and improve their health through fitness and nutrition. And I love that part about Chris. I mean, like, I think he will help you get swole. I think he'll help you lose weight and all that stuff. But fitness and nutrition, those are the keys for Chris. He wants you to achieve your goals in a healthy way, through a healthy lifestyle. And so he guides and supports his clients every step of the way. So you can just show up, you put in the work, and you have confidence that what you're doing is working. Everything is personalized to you. He's an online fitness coach. This is what he does, and he personalizes it to every client, every person who works with him. He personalizes your workout program, your nutritional goals, your weekly video check-ins, and more. In this world, in 2022, we can do these things online, and you have access. You don't just have to have the coach, in your town that you turn to when you need help with your fitness goals, your lifestyle goals. You can find anyone all over the world. So why not find the guy who's a huge Pitt fan and is really, really good at what he does? Thanksgiving, of course, is coming up. It's a great time right now to get your healthy habits in place, so that, as we move through fall is a huge eating time, right? Halloween's coming, Thanksgiving's coming, Christmas is coming. You want to take steps forward this fall instead of backwards, so you're ready when we get through these seasons, and you can have healthy habits and keep to them and maintain them. I mean, you talk about healthy eating. You go to a tailgate, you don't usually find healthy food, but Chris is gone. He's got an online tailgating cookbook to help you find healthy choices, and it's not bad food. I don't think he's got kale chips in there, although kale chips are awesome, but I digress. But he's got a cookbook for tailgates, so you can eat healthy, or at least maintain some of your goals and your healthy habits at a tailgate. Go to chrisgatesfitness.com. Chris, C-H-R-I-S, Gates, G-A-T-E-S, fitness.com. And if you mention Panther-Lair, because he's a big Pitt fan, like I said, if you mention Panther-Lair, you get 75% off your first month of coaching. So if anybody's going to give you anything for 75% off, you should probably try it out, right? I mean, like I think that's just sort of a standing thing. Like if you can get 75% off of something, you should try it out. And if it's a great product like what Chris offers with his online fitness coaching, you should definitely check it out. chrisgatesfitness.com, mention Panther-Lair and get 75% off your first month of coaching. All right, want to get into the chat screen here. RJCman38 is a super chatter. Says the quarterback play is where the final record will likely be dictated by. And yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, and to be honest, I mean, I think we've been saying that since the summer, right? I think I said from the start that quarterback play was going to be the thing that decided if Pitt went back to Charlotte or went back to 8 wins. And I don't want to say I feel vindicated, but I mean, like, that's what it's been. Now, there's a question of the injury that Kedon Slovis had, getting hurt, in the end of the first half in the Tennessee game, and coming back from that, playing against Rhode Island, and how he's played in the last 2 games. You wonder if there are lingering effects from, what seemed to be a concussion at the end of the first half against Tennessee. You wonder if there were, lingering effects from that. You wonder if he's still dealing with that and if that's impacted his play. But there's no question that the quarterback play is the difference maker for this team. That's part of what I talked about with sort of that rhythm passing game is if you cut down on the reads, if you make it sort of a quick read, get the ball out, dink and dunk offense where 1 read, 2 read, check down. And shoot, they only have like 2 or 3 wide receivers left at this point. So it shouldn't be hard to develop something that says 1 read, it's not there. 2 read, it's not there. Here's the check down to El Barto or one of the running backs or whoever it is that you want to, check the ball down to. That seems to make the most sense to me. Instead of dropping back and having a full progression to work through all the way across the field, cut it down, slim it down, cut the field in half, cut it down to just 2 reads, whatever makes the most sense. But give this kid something, I don't want to say easy to work with, but give him something to work with along those lines where he can just, process less information, process it more quickly, and make, as Frank Signetti likes to say, or at least he liked to say 13 years ago, make decisive decisions. Let's see. Bill Florigen. I apologize, Bill, if that J is silent. But Bill is a super chatter. Listen, if you want to make sure your comment gets read or your question gets asked or your question gets answered, you can click that $sign down at the bottom there, and you can be a super chatter where you contribute a couple bucks to the podcast, and we make sure we read your comments and your questions. And Bill says, in your opinion, if Slovis continues to struggle to get the passing game where it needs to be, does Signetti change the game plan to fit Slovis? Or do they go with Nick Patty and Nate Yarnell? Is it Slovis or bust? I think it's Slovis or bust right now. And I think the last week has to have been spent developing and adjusting the game plan to what Kedon Slovis can do. Is what I just talked about with the quick reads, rhythm passing, dink and dunk, all that stuff. I think you need to adapt that to Kedon Slovis's game so that he, make it work for him. I'm sure Frank Signetti went into the season thinking he had an offense drawn up that was going to fit into Kedon Slovis's abilities and talents and, highlight his strengths and cover his weaknesses. I don't think that's necessarily been the case. Maybe the second half against West Virginia, maybe the first half against Tennessee, but otherwise, you're talking about a guy who has played, 4.5 games? And you're talking about 2 halves out of those 9 where, 2 of the halves seem to be pretty good, and the other 7 have been questionable performances at best. So, I think they're going to tailor it to Slovis. Could there come a point where they make a change to Nick Patty or Nate Yarnell? Sure, I think anything is possible. I think if you get to a point where you feel like your offense is just struggling so mightily that you need to give it a spark, I think they could look at that. Now, I think Panarduzzi is sort of I was going to say like what Pat Narduzzi's history is with changing quarterbacks in a game. I mean, I think back to 2015. They played Notre Dame, they played North Carolina, and they played Miami. And I feel like in the first half of maybe all three of those games, at least two of them, Nathan Peterman was awful. Had like 2 completions, or 3 completions or something. It was just terrible in the first half of each of those games. It might have been all 3, or it might have just been 2 of them. And he never went to Chad Voight. He never made the change. Obviously, Peterman started all of 2016. In 2017, he did make some quarterback changes. I think so. They went to Ben DiNucci. I think DiNucci might have. Goodness. I forget exactly when it happened, but he benched Max Brown and put in Ben DiNucci. And DiNucci might have started the Georgia Tech game and played really poorly. The defense forced like 5 fumbles, and they lost that game rather convincingly. He might have started DiNucci and then benched him for Brown at the end of that game, and then Brown came in and played from there on out until Brown got hurt at Syracuse, and then DiNucci was the starter again. DiNucci ultimately, I would say, got benched for Kenny Pickett in the Virginia Tech game, but I think the plan all along going into that game, and I heard the plan going into that game, was that DiNucci would start, but Pickett would play in the second quarter, and then they would decide after that. And the decision after that, obviously, was Kenny Pickett. Now, for the last 4 years, it's just been Kenny Pickett. So there's never really been a situation where they've had to make a decision, should we change the quarterback here? And so this is sort of a unique territory to be in where you consider that, because there's not a lot of precedent either way. Like I said, I mean, there was the 2015, a few games there where it seemed like you probably could have, or maybe even should have, changed the quarterback because the starter was playing so poorly and nothing happened. And then 2017, where there were benchings that were done multiple times, switching back and forth, Brown to DiNucci to Brown, and then DiNucci to Pickett. And so there's not a ton of precedent either way. And part of it is because they had the same starting quarterback for 4 years in a row. So I don't know what it would take to get Patty or Yarnell in the game. My thought is that Patty is higher on the depth chart than Yarnell at this point. I'm also far more intrigued by Nate Yarnell than I am Nick Patty, and that's no disrespect to Nick. I think I've said a bunch of times, I think Nick could win the Peach Bowl. I like what Nick brings. Every time Nick has been on the field, he has produced in one way or another. Sometimes, more glamorously than others. But I mean, I'm really intrigued by what we saw from Nate Yarnell in that Western Michigan game, and it was small sample size. 15 passes or something like that, 12 passes. We've seen more of Nick Patty, but I'm intrigued by Yarnell, his size. He can move around a little bit. He seemed to run the offense well. He's got a good arm. I'm intrigued by Nate Yarnell and what he could bring. But for now, and I think for the foreseeable future, I do think it's Slovis or bust. And I think they've tried. I think they've spent this week trying to tailor the offense to what fits for him and make it work for him and with him over these final 6 games. All right, let's get into some more comments and questions here. Jesus Loves Comics says, this is how I look at things. That nasty loss was a wake-up call like Western Michigan last year. We rebounded and covered for Virginia Tech. If we can get a little bit of the pass game going with Louisville and mix it in the run, we stand a good chance. The North Carolina game then would be first place or bust in the division. In Syracuse, we'll see if they can beat Clemson. And Tennessee beat Alabama. We have the best loss in the country. Yeah, this stretch, I mean, there's nobody I would say here that they can't beat, and there's probably, nobody I would say that they can't lose to. And I mean, that goes beyond just like an any given Sunday type of, well, anybody can win any game. I mean, I look at these 6 teams, and I look at Pitt, and I say, Pitt could win these games. And also I could see these teams playing in such a way, and Pitt playing in such a way that Pitt could lose these games. I don't think either outcome would really surprise me. The Georgia Tech outcome surprised me. Even up until like the final few minutes of the game, it wasn't. it surprised me because up until the final few minutes of the game, I was pretty sure Pitt was still going to win. That they would find a way to eke it out. It would be ugly. It would cause a lot of complaints throughout the week, but they would still find a way to pull it off. That surprised me. If Virginia Tech had beat Pitt, that would have surprised me as well. Tennessee did not surprise me. I thought Pitt could win. I maybe even I thought Pitt would win, but it didn't surprise me that they lost that game. And then looking at these final 6, I mean, I don't think there would be. Well, Virginia might. Virginia would surprise me. If they lose to Virginia, I would be a little surprised. But the other 5, I'm not going to be surprised if they lose to even a Louisville. With the game being on the road, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose to Carolina. They've never won a game in Chapel Hill. I wouldn't be surprised about Syracuse or Miami. Duke, that's gonna be a tough one. I could see that going either way. I like how Duke is playing right now. I like their quarterback. I'm pretty sure Pitt should win that game, particularly at home. But we'll see how they rebound from a pretty heartbreaking loss to North Carolina last week. Let's see. Anthony Tennyson says, Chris, I really think we can run the table if Frank Signetti gets the passing game going downfield to Jaden Bradley, and it will open it up for Izzy Abanikanda even more. So Jalen Barden's an interesting guy. We haven't talked about sort of the news here of Jaden Bradley announcing that he was entering the transfer portal. I'm kind of the opinion that was probably a mutual parting as much as anything, but the how or the why of it is not as significant as the what. And the what is Pitt lost another wide receiver. And I say another because they lost Jordan Addison, obviously, in the offseason. And the thing I keep saying to people, and I've written it, and I said it on the Morning Pitt this morning, the biggest thing with the wide receivers right now, in light of Jaden Bradley leaving the roster or being off the roster, the biggest thing about the wide receivers is numbers. This was not going to be a huge group to begin with. And I think if you go back and find things I said through the spring and through the summer, I said, look, I think this is a talented group, especially, I was even saying this when Jordan Addison was still here. I said, this is a really talented group. I like this group a lot. There's just not a lot of them. I like your top 5 of Jordan Addison and Kanate Mumfield and Jared Wayne and Jaden Bradley and Jalen Barden. I like that top 5. That's good, but that's kind of it. And then they're bringing in this wild card Bub Means. I don't know what to expect out of him, but that's kind of all they have. And so numbers were always going to be an issue. And then you take Jordan Addison out of it. And obviously that's a huge hit for talent. In addition to a huge hit in terms of the numbers. And now you take one more guy out of the mix. They were already down to a point where one injury, which was Kanate Mumfield not playing against Virginia Tech, and you ended up with, I was just looking at it. This is my personnel chart. You ended up with Wayne, Means, and Bradley playing just tons and tons of snaps together throughout the game. They were in 11 personnel for 43 snaps in that game, and it was almost all those 3 guys together. Let me even look if there were any other snaps with 3 receivers that it wasn't those 3. No, because when Miles Alston got a few snaps, but that was with 2 receivers and 2 tight ends in a back. Yeah, every one of those snaps in 11 personnel with 3 receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 back, it was Wayne, Means, and Bradley. So, and that's with 1 injury to the group as it was constructed. Now you're taking one of those guys out of the mix. And if you want to run 3 receivers, it's Mumfield, Wayne, and Means. And then you see if you can work Jalen Barden into there. Because after that, you're talking about Gavin Thompson and Miles Alston and Addison Copeland and Che Wabuko. And that's probably not the group you want to roll out there. Now, Jalen Barton's a really interesting guy to me. There's no question about the speed. I don't think there's any question about the talent. But something is keeping him off the field. And I don't know what it is. I'm sure the coaches would probably say something about consistency or details or focus or lining up right or knowing the plays, this kind of thing. There was a play in the was it the Tennessee game where Barden and Jared Wayne basically ran into each other downfield. Jared Wayne seemed particularly mad about that, so I'm thinking that might have been on Barden. I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what happened on that play. But I would have to think if there's a reason Jalen Barden hasn't been on the field, I mean, I'm guessing the coaches would probably say that. They would talk about things like details and consistency and reliability. If that's the case, he needs to figure all those things out because he can help this team. He's been able to, he has the talent, he has had the talent to help this team all season long. And now at this point, when they're down to 5 scholarship receivers or whatever it is, they absolutely need him out there. You can't just go Mumfield, Means, and Wayne the entire game. And if you want to run 3 receiver sets, you're going to need somebody else who can play in that group and give a guy a breather every now and then. And Jalen Barden is the best option for that. He's just got to, whatever the coaches need to see from him, he needs to show it. He needs to do it because he can help this offense and he can help this passing game and he can help this team. Now, I do think you'll see a lot of 2 tight end sets on Saturday night. I think you'll see 2 back sets on Saturday night. I'm guessing, that was the, I think the Virginia Tech game that I was talking about. They had 43 snaps out of the 11 personnel where you have 3 receivers, a tight end, and a back. I'm guessing you'll see, I don't think that'll be the dominant personnel grouping for this Louisville game. I think you'll probably see more 21 or 12 personnel, whether it's 2 tight ends or 2 backs, or maybe both. It might be 22. You might have two tight ends and 2 backs. I wouldn't be surprised by any of that. Partially because they have Rodney Hammond back, and so I think they want to get him on the field. But then also partially because they just don't have the depth at receiver, probably to run as much 3 receiver sets as they want. And so that's a big part of the impact, maybe the biggest part of the impact of losing Jaden Bradley. I absolutely would like to see Jalen Barden step up into it. Hopefully this off week has been a good one for him. Hopefully he's shown the coaches some of the things they need to see in order to get him back on the field. All right, I said at the beginning of the show that I had posted a poll on Twitter of what will Pitt's record be in the final 6 games. And we're up to about, I'm checking in on it again, close to 1,000 votes. We're 986 votes. 35% saying 4-2, 28.5% saying 5-1, 25.4% saying 6-0. And I open it up to the live stream, the chat. You guys post your records there. John Christovich says 5-1. Jesus Loves Comics says 6-0. Bill Florgian says 5-1. Steak in the Grill says 5-1. Garrett Sherwin says 5-1 or 4-2. Now the thing about that, Garrett, I see where you're going, and I tend to agree. I would be, my final option would come down to one of those two. But the reality is those 2 records would have drastically different impacts on the perception of the season. If Pitt goes 5-1, they finish 9-3. If they go 4-2, they finish 8-4. There's a big difference between 9-3 and 8-4. And look, a 9-3 Pitt team probably gets close to the same bowl assignment that an 8-4 Pitt team does. 9-3 Pitt team has a chance to make it to Charlotte. 8-4 does not. Because I think if you're 8-4, you're going to be 5-3 in the conference. Already having that 1 win among your 2 losses so far. And I don't think 5-3 is going to win the Coastal. Not with Carolina starting off 3-0. 6-2 still could win the Coastal, but it's going to be a little more challenging. I think you have to beat Carolina if you're going to get there on 6-2. But that would take you going 5-1 down the stretch. And so 5-1 or 4-2, those are probably the most likely outcomes here. But I think they're significantly different in terms of how they make the season look. Like I said, you probably end up in roughly the same bowl game. You may or may not make it to Charlotte with either record, but 9-3 versus 8-4. I mean, 9-3 gives you a chance to go 10-3, and you have back-to-back 10-win seasons for the first time since the early 80s. So, that would be good. And all this talk of how they did or didn't, how they built off of the ACC championship or failed to do so. If you finish, if you can somehow get out of the regular season at 9-3 and win your bowl game and go 10-3, that's a pretty good rebound. You know what I mean? I think that's a pretty good follow-up. And 9-4 wouldn't be terrible. If you go 8-4 in the regular season, but then win a bowl game to finish 9-4, and you win 19 games over 2 seasons, that's pretty good. I think a lot of Dave Wanstead supporters said that winning 19 over 2 seasons is great. But I think there's a big difference between 9-3 and 8-4, because 8-4, as I've said, 8 wins in the regular season should be the floor for this program, where it never really dips below that. It would be unfortunate and disappointing to go from an ACC championship season, 11-win season, and the next year be at your floor. You'd like to think it wouldn't be that severe of a drop. I mean, a real severe drop would be to 7-5 or 6-6 or something like that, and I don't think that's going to happen. But 8-4 would be a disappointment. See some more records. Scott Lynch says 4-2. See if anybody else. We'll get to more records as we do. Royce Beacom says, I can't believe the Cignetti offense has to be simplified for Kedon Slovis. Is it that much more complex than the USC offense that he came from? Not a freshman quarterback, but an experienced, accomplished upperclassman. Yeah, well, I think the thing about that, Royce, is, I don't know how it compares to USC's offense. I don't know about complicated or simplified. I'm just basing it on what we've seen, particularly since he came back from, missing the Western Michigan game and the second half of the Tennessee game. He has not looked comfortable. And so if we want to call it simplified, if we want to call it streamlined, if we want to call it tailored, whatever we want to call it, we need, Pitt needs an offense that's going to make an offensive scheme and play design and play calling that's going to make or help Kedon Slovis feel comfortable in the pocket and feel comfortable reading the defense, feel comfortable scanning the field, and feel comfortable getting rid of the ball quickly. One of my favorite stats this week, and I've said it over and over again, according to Pro Football Focus, when Kedon Slovis gets rid of the ball in less than 2.5 seconds, he's completing 77.9% of his passes. And he's averaging like 9 yards per attempt. It's much better when he gets rid of the ball quicker. And even if that means not stretching downfield right off the bat, it's still better when he gets rid of the ball quicker. Don't hold on to the ball. Design an offense that gets the ball out. Call plays that get the ball out. That's what it comes down to, I think, for me. And so more than, they got to simplify it, or it's too complicated, or it's this or it's that, I'm not even thinking in those terms. I'm thinking in terms of how can you design the offense, what plays can you draw up, what plays can you call that are going to get the ball out of his hands quickly, even if it's for medium gains. Medium gains are good. Pitman Zach 94 says Syracuse, Duke, and North Carolina are going to be tough. And John Christofich says Miami and North Carolina will be difficult games. I think the thing about North Carolina is the offense. Is how good their offense is, how well they're scoring, and they have a really good quarterback. I mean, Drake May is looking like the ACC Player of the Year right now with the way he's played through the first half of the season, and so that's the challenge is being able to score with an offense like that. Miami's been up and down. They have looked like a mess at times, and then other times they've looked slightly less like a mess. Syracuse, I don't know what to make of Syracuse. I'm still withholding judgment. Their tough run was supposed to begin last week against NC State, but then Devin Leary didn't play, and it looked like NC State has never recruited another quarterback to be the backup to Devin Leary because that kid was not very good. And Syracuse was able to win that game, but they got a little bit lucky in not having to face Devin Leary. And I think that could have changed the equation if they had. So we continue to withhold judgment on Syracuse, which shouldn't have to be for long because they're going to Clemson on Saturday. And that's going to be a game that tells us quite a bit about Sorry if you heard that. I'm on ESPN's page looking at the ACC scoreboard, and I apparently have my volume up, and ESPN's autoplay videos started going. But that's going to be a game that tells us a lot about where Syracuse is. If Syracuse goes to Clemson and wins, then yes, we're going to have to talk about Syracuse as a serious team, a legit ACC contender. If they don't, then we're going to have to reconsider that. We're not going to say they're trash, but you pump the brakes a little bit on Syracuse being a top 15 team if they don't win that game. Let's see here. Ed Mahoney says, I believe they fixed the passing game to a point that helps the run game continue to be the strength of the offense, 5-1. And that's probably, Ed, that's probably a great point. No, that is a great point, Ed. And I think you're probably right that ultimately what they'll do with the passing game is try to make it work in service of the running game and help try to do enough with the passing game to loosen up the defensive pressure against the run so they can run it well. Now, ultimately, you'd like to get to a point where you're going to, pass well enough that they have to loosen up against the run well enough that they have to get tight again, and then, hit them with play action shots. That's ultimately how this thing is supposed to work. That's, I think, the goal they've had all season. I think that's what they worked toward all offseason, is trying to make play action a big part of this offense and trying to establish the run and build the pass game off of it. They kind of have to work in reverse now. They have to establish, they're going to have to get something out of the passing game to help open up opportunities in the run. Because teams right now have nothing to fear other than the running game. Teams right now are pretty much just looking at stopping the run and saying, we want to make Kedon Slovis beat us. And at some point in the second half of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens every week, Kedon Slovis is going to have to show whether or not he's up to the task of beating an opponent. He hasn't, second half of West Virginia, first half of Tennessee, he showed that he looked like he was up for it. Otherwise, not so much. Fourth quarter of Georgia Tech? That's about all you got. So they're going to have to find a way to get the running game and passing game to work in concert. It's just a question of whether that happens. Let's scroll down here. Chris Gates Fitness, our friend Chris, who always checks in here, says, is it at all possible that the Bradley departure helps the passing game? Or is that just wishful thinking? Thinking perhaps it could help chemistry-wise. That's an interesting thought. I don't know how much of a... I think Jaden Bradley might have had his issues with the coaching staff. I think there might have been some confrontations or run-ins there. I'm not sure how he impacted team chemistry. Right now, I look at sort of the net impact of his departure, and like I talked about with the numbers, I think that's it's going to be hard to say that helps the passing game when you take another guy out of the mix and you're down to the numbers that they're down to. It's hard to say whether passing game should get better without Jaden Bradley when it now they only have Mumfield, Means, Wayne, and then guys who haven't really played. And that includes Jalen Barden, who, I've talked about before. I think he could be really, really good. And he should be on the field, I would think. I think he's got the talent to be on the field, but he hasn't been. So you're really only looking at about 3 guys who have played many snaps this season. And I'm not sure if that helps the passing game. So it's an interesting thought, but the thing that's going to help the passing game is Kedon Slovis' development and Frank Signetti continuing to tailor the offense to what Slovis is comfortable doing. Let's see. Royce Beacom says the concern is Louisville. Virginia Tech was already crowding the box, so that has to be Louisville's strategy till they stop the run. Yeah, I think everybody's going to try and stop the run. RJC Man 38 says that Syracuse was able to run all over Louisville's defense. Let's just check the stats real quick on that one, since I still have it open. That was that 31-7 game in the season opener. And Syracuse ran for 208 yards against Louisville. Sean Tucker had 21 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown. Garrett Schrader ran for 94 yards, the quarterback. Now, I mean, we know that's not going to be part of Pitt's attack to have quarterback run yards in there, but they did. I mean, 200 yards rushing is good. Louisville is obviously going to load up to stop Pitt's running game. They're going to load up to try and make Keaton Slovis beat them. And at some point, he's going to have to complete some passes. So, Pitt can run. Pitt can try to run. Pitt can emphasize the run. But at some point, quarterback's going to have to make a play. Let's see. CD says, hey, Chris, with all the offensive line injuries, how many offensive linemen does Pitt have available and ready to play? How many offensive linemen? So, I think they've still got a 2 deep. All right. So your starting lineup on Saturday night, I would guess left to right is Branson Taylor at left tackle, Marcus Minor at left guard, Jake Cradle at center, Blake Zabovic at right guard, and Matt Gonsalves at right tackle. For your second team, I mean, Gabe Hoy is going to be your backup right tackle. Gonsalves could swing from right to left. I think he'll play left tackle along with Gabe Hoy on the field at right tackle. I think your backup left guard is Ryan Jacoby. You get into the backup guards on the other side, it gets a little bit dicey. I mean, it could be a guy like, goodness, I'm not even really sure who the other guard is. Jacoby might have to be like a swing guard. I don't know. Maybe they get down into, some of the guys like a Terrence Enos or somebody like that. Maybe Terrence Moore could play some guard. Dave Borbely said that Ryan Baer, the true freshman, could play some guard. Although they haven't done that yet. Baer is going to be basically the number 2 left tackle. Although I think if something happened to Branson Taylor, Gonsalves would take those snaps at left tackle. But Ryan Baer is only going to be a couple plays away from getting on the field if there's some injuries or something like that. So I don't know. It's they've still probably got about 8 guys they would feel comfortable putting in there. Terrence Moore is a backup center now, I think, behind Jake Cradle. Jacoby is a swing guard, and then Baer as an extra tackle, in addition to Gabe Hoy as a backup tackle. So maybe you're looking at 8 or 9 offensive linemen. It's definitely taken a hit. They've definitely taken a hit with, Carter Warren being done for the season and Owen Drexel being out for a long time. Because you look at it now, and with all those returning starters and all those guys coming back, they've got one guy from last year's group who's starting at the position he played last year. And that's Marcus Minor at left guard. Carter Warren's done for the season. Owen Drexel being out for a while kind of affects 2 spots because Jake Cradle slides from right guard into center. And then Gabe Hoy, who was the starting right tackle last season, hasn't started a game this year. But in the last few weeks, he's been getting his reps kind of ramped back up. With the exception of the Virginia Tech game, they kind of went down a little bit. But you don't have that group from last year back. You thought you would have them all back, and you have virtually none of them back. So that's a significant change from what was expected this year, and I think the effects are being felt. Now, the upside is you're getting a lot of reps for Matt Gonsalves and Branson Taylor and Blake Zabovic. Those guys are playing a lot. Jake Cradle's playing a lot at center. If he is, potentially going to be the center for next season, he's getting a lot of reps. So this is all valuable, but it would have been nice to have those 5 guys from last year starting in their same spots again this year. Maybe it changes how some of these games have gone. All right, the hour has gone. Our time has definitely flown by. I apologize to anybody who was in the comments asking, posting comments or asking questions. I apologize if we didn't get to you. Remember, you can always be a super chatter, and we'll definitely get to your comments and definitely get to your questions. Let's try that on Saturday night when we have the post-game show after the Louisville game. Make sure you're a super chatter, so we'll definitely get to your comments and questions during that show. I don't know what time we'll be live yet. I'm hoping around midnight, but if you subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, turn on notifications, we'll send an alert to your phone so you always know when we go live. You won't miss any of our post-game live show. Of course, you also you'll know when we post morning Pitt videos every morning, Monday through Friday, right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and you'll know when we go live on Wednesday nights for this here Panther-Lair show. You know the website, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. That's the most comprehensive source, Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for everybody who tuned in tonight during the live show. It's been a lot of fun, as it always is. We'll talk to you for our next live show. It'll be Saturday night after the Pitt-Louisville game, sometime around there, after midnight, I would say. And that should be fun. It's always fun when we have the late night Panther-Lair post-game show. So thanks again for tuning in tonight. I appreciate it. We will talk to you Saturday night live, and between now and then, we'll have the morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.